Senate Republican leaders will not hold a vote on their latest effort to repeal and replace Obamacare. 4 Republican senators had come out against the Graham-Cassidy bill, meaning it was essentially dead in the Senate. Here are the plan's co-authors, Senators Bill Cassidy and Lindsey Graham, addressing this major setback this afternoon.
Well, to be clear, through events that are under our control and not under our control, we don't have the votes. Okay? That's in speaking to the leadership, speaking to the president. I think Lindsey and he are on speed dial. We've made the decision, since we don't have the votes, we will postpone that vote. Okay? Am I disappointed? Absolutely.
The leadership team has done everything we've asked them. We're coming back to this after taxes. We're going to have time to explain our concept. We'll have a better process, and we're going to take this show on the road.
CBS News political director Steve Chaggaris joins me now from our Washington bureau. Steve, so how significant is this setback in the effort to repeal Obamacare?
Quite significant in the fact that it's not going anywhere. This is the second time now this year that the Senate has tried to do something on health care. The first time it got to the floor and failed, famously with John McCain's no vote as the third no vote to sink that one. This time it didn't even make it to the floor. You had 3 Republicans, Rand Paul, John McCain, and Susan Collins from Maine, who came out yesterday and said she wasn't going to support this. And so with the writing on the wall, that they did not have enough support to get this thing passed, 50 votes, they decided, you know what, we're not even going to put it on the floor for a vote this time.
Senator Graham says they're going to circle back to health care, Steve, after tackling tax reform. Is that going to be an option?
Sure, it's an option, and I think that Republicans will continue to try to do something on this. The question is, what is it that they're going to try to do? They had a skinny repeal bill before that failed. Now they've had this Graham-Cassidy bill, which would have significantly changed health care. That didn't even make it to the floor. So the Republicans need to really come up with a plan that they can sell to people and something that they can all agree on before they move forward on this. What is that going to be? They bought themselves some time to try to figure that out, but that is the big question after tax reform, and the next time they bring this up is, what is it that they're going to offer the American people as a replacement when they repeal Obamacare? I
mean, the substance of what they offer is really important, but several Republican senators, as you've pointed out, were opposed to the process when it comes to this health care repeal, more so than the plan itself. Can they return to what's called regular order on Capitol Hill further down the line and pass health care reforms?
We'll see on that. I mean, I think the process problem with this one was that it was rushed. There was a deadline at the end of this week in order to get this passed under the procedural rules that were set. In order to get it passed with a simple majority, they had to get it done by the end of the week. And so rushing it through, rushing the process really irked John McCain and some others. And so that was the issue this time around. We'll just have to see what they plan moving forward. Again, this is something that's been in the works for years, yet they have not been able to coalesce behind one specific idea on a replacement situation. So do they do that in this interim period? Do they come up with something that a majority of Republicans can, or that all the Republicans can agree on to move forward on repealing and replacing Obamacare? That remains to be seen.
Now, there are both Republicans and Democrats that say there are problems with the Affordable Care Act as it stands. So what about bipartisan efforts to fix the health care system? I know that Senators Lamar Alexander and Patty Murray had been talking about that. Where does that stand at this point? Some sort of bipartisan fix?
Yeah, that's on hold, if not over with. It doesn't seem like there's a huge appetite to try to find a middle ground on this. I mean, consider this. Democrats consider Obamacare a signature piece of legislation, signature law. And so there's no rush to tweak it significantly. Republicans, on the other hand, have been campaigning about repealing this. So where do you find the middle ground, and where do you find 50 votes in the middle in between those two? I think that's a lot harder than Republicans, for instance, coming up with 50 or 51 votes to replace and repeal and replace. And so I think Republicans are probably figuring, let's come up with some kind of plan that we all can agree on as Republicans and move forward with repealing and replacing, as opposed to trying to figure out some sort of bipartisan fix.
Is the Republican caucus going to have an easier time on tax reform?
That's a very good question. As everybody says, tax reform is a very difficult subject. We'll see what happens on that. There's a lot that the conservatives and others in the Republican Party disagree on. How are they going to pay for a lot of this stuff? Do we wind up with full reform, or is it just going to be a lowering of certain tax brackets? Will it wind up just being a few tax cuts? We'll see what happens at the end of the day on that. But I think Republicans at least agree on one thing. They've got to come out of this fight with something to show, because they really haven't passed anything that's even near significant legislation to take home to their constituents and say we've accomplished something this year. So I think something will get done on tax cuts or tax reform, whatever you want to call it, just so they can go home and say we've done something here.
Where do Democrats stand at this point on tax reforms?
They're not going to be playing. This is going to be all among, again, it's going to be all among Republicans. You're not going to see Democrats really part of this process at all. There's not a huge appetite among Democrats for these kinds of discussions that the Republicans are having about tax reform. So I'd be shocked if you see many Democrats involved. Of course, there's been some outreach to conservative Democrats, people like Joe Manchin in West Virginia and Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota. These are people who represent states that Trump won in 2016. They're pretty conservative states. So there's a hope that Republicans and the White House can sway them to at least come along, give them a little bit more pad in case there are Republicans that get cold feet on this. But I don't think you're going to see en masse Republicans working with Republicans, Democrats working with Republicans on tax reform.
What does this all mean, Steve, to President Trump's agenda?
Well, it means at the end of the day, again, what does he have to show for his first 8 months in office, his first year in office, or at least going into the midterms? And this is something that he has argued pretty vociferously for on the campaign and since. And so I think he wants to see Congress do something, pass something, get something to his desk that he can sign and he can hold up and say, we're accomplishing the agenda that I promised on the campaign trail. He hasn't been able to do that with Obamacare or repealing Obamacare. So I think there's a hope that they can do this with taxes. And again, even if it's something as simple as just lowering tax brackets, that might be enough for them to say, look, we succeeded in doing something that we can show to people. And that would be, I think, a big success, or at least the president would consider that a big success.
Steve Chaggaris. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Thanks, Stephanie.